Hi there. Most of us have been told that procrastination is a discipline problem. We assume that when we delay important tasks, we are being lazy, unmotivated, or irresponsible. But what if that is not the whole story? What if procrastination is actually an emotional response? Welcome to Streams of Emotions. On this platform, we learn, we listen, and lessen the load of emotions. My name is Moses. You can call me Mo for short, and I'm really glad you are here with me again. Today's episode, we want to look at something very important, something most of us, if not all of us, struggle with it at a particular point in our life. For some, it's really chronic and they are struggling to come out of it. And that is what we're going to look at: procrastination. What if procrastination isn't a time management problem, but an emotion problem? What if? This is what I want us to look at. That is why we are looking at the subject. Procrastination is not because you are lazy, but it's an emotional first aid. Think about the last time you delayed doing something important. Maybe you had a report due on Friday, but suddenly you began to see some need that you needed to attend to. So maybe it was cleaning, so you decided to clean. Maybe you remembered some emails or messages that you needed to reply to. You did that, or you decided to watch that just one YouTube short or video for a while and it turned into hours, and before you knew, the work wasn't done. Does this sound familiar? Oh, yes. Some of us, or most of us, just as I mentioned earlier, all find ourselves in this kind of trap sometimes. And whenever we are about to do a task, we are usually faced with some triggers such as anxiety, fear of failure, self doubt, or we get overwhelmed, or the quest of being perfect. Our minds instinctively try to look for relief instead of confronting these feelings that are mostly associated with the task. That is why we usually scroll the social media, watch video, try to clean the house or do something, respond to messages, and find other activities that will heal us, so to say, for that short time. But in that moment, it may feel good, but it's only serving as a first aid. It's just subsiding the issue, but the issue is still there. So I say that procrastination is usually referred to as a first aid because it just helps us to avoid the emotional pain temporarily. The problem is that while it may provide a short term relief, it rarely solves the underlying issue. So the task remains, the deadline gets closer, and the emotional burden also grows even heavier. That is a challenge of procrastination. And whenever we find ourselves in a situation like that, most of us may call ourselves as being lazy, or oh, I need to be more disciplined, or what's wrong with me. But just as I mentioned, psychologists and research have shown otherwise. And it says that procrastination isn't about avoiding a work or a task, it's about avoiding the uncomfortable feeling connected to the work or task. This is very important, and I want you to understand we don't procrastinate because the task is difficult. We procrastinate because of how the task makes us feel. That is why we procrastinate. Perhaps let's say you want to write a dissertation, you want to write a research, or you want to do an assignment that you have to get done, but you worry it will not be good enough. Or sometimes you're overwhelmed by it. How am I going to get all these things together? And let's say you want to even apply for a job, but you worry, how am I going to meet all their needs? I need to rewrite, and sometimes even this job, when you apply, they are not minding you. So those kind of uncomfortable feelings around it will cause you to procrastinate what you are supposed to do. So it's not usually about the task, which it is. Sometimes the task is a factor to consider, but the feelings that comes along with it is very important. Is it fear, anxiety, boredom, uncertainty, embarrassment, failure, perfectionism? What kind of feeling do you have? And that is why it's important to regulate our emotions to help us overcome the challenge of procrastination. And emotional regulation is all about managing those uncomfortable feelings. So, healthy emotional regulation says this feels difficult, but I will do it anyway. But unhealthy emotional regulation says I will do something else so that I don't have to go through these feelings right now. So unhealthy emotional regulation always try to postpone the feeling, try to avoid the feeling. I'll talk a bit more about that. So there are research, and this was done in 2013 by by Fuchsia Cyril and Timothy Pitchell. From their research, they realized that procrastination is not a time management issue, rather, it's an emotional regulation issue and is driven by the need to avoid negative feeling. So all this means is that because we feel bad about something, we delay it to feel better for a little while. And this relief is very raw, but it's usually just temporary. Unfortunately, just as I mentioned earlier, the problem does not disappear. It usually comes back bigger and bringing guilt, stress, and even more anxiety. I want you to think about this. Maybe you're a university student, or maybe you're a student and you had an assignment due next week. And instead of you to find time to work on the assignment, you think about it, you get overwhelmed, and because of that feeling, you start scrolling social media for minutes, you decide to relax, and that improves your mood for a while. But tomorrow or days pass by, and the assignment is still waiting, and there is less time, more pressure, and even greater stress. You see, so the more we're trying to have an emotional aid to solve the problem, the more it becomes like a burden to us. I have come to realize that one of the biggest emotional drivers of procrastination is perfectionism. Perfectionism is the belief that if something can't be done perfectly well, it shouldn't be done at all. So you may hear people say that, oh, what if I fail? What if people judge me? I'm not ready for it. I'll wait until I feel more confident. But this is the trick of it. Confidence usually comes after taking the necessary action, not before it. So it's something we have to take notice of it. And another reason why we procrastinate is what psychologists refer to as avoidance coping. Avoidance coping is all about trying to reduce stress by avoiding what causes it instead of dealing with it. That is what avoidance coping is. So it works perfectly in the short time, in the interim, but in the long term, it doesn't help at all. So perhaps you're avoiding a difficult conversation with someone, and every time you think about bringing it up, you have that feeling that there may be an argument, and so you try to keep it to yourself and you say, oh, I'll talk about it later. Days may pass, weeks may pass, even months, and that resentment will begin to build up, replacing that conversation that you needed to make with a person. However, anytime those conversations or those thoughts pass through your mind, it makes you feel a little more anxious. So avoiding it rather is costing you in some way. It may cost you days, months, or even years of mental energy. So you see why avoidance doesn't really help the situation at all. Research constantly shows that people who procrastinate often experience higher levels of stress, guilt, anxiety, and lower well being over time. This is the reason because today's emotional escape often becomes tomorrow's emotional burden. So, how can we overcome procrastination? Okay, the first step is to stop calling yourself lazy. You aren't. Instead, ask yourself a different question. What emotion am I trying to avoid? This is something personally I'm going to apply to myself because there was an application that I had to make. I think I was having that feeling of being overwhelmed with the application that I need to make, and because of that I left it for a while. And that application is still waiting for me. It's something it needs to be done. That is what procrastination can do. So now I'm asking myself this very question. What emotion am I trying to avoid? Is it being overwhelmed with the application? Okay, maybe yours is different. Maybe you are trying to avoid fear of failure. Maybe you are trying to avoid not meeting the expectation of people. Once you identify that emotion, it becomes easier to address the real problem instead of attacking yourself. And I've even come to realize that mostly the things we procrastinate on, if you get time and you focus on it, it doesn't really take a longer time. Or sometimes those feelings are not really real as you anticipated or imagined. The second strategy is something psychologists call behavioral activation. Don't worry about that big name. It simply means start before you feel ready. Behavioral activation is very important. Just as I mentioned earlier, confidence usually comes after you get going. Okay. So instead of saying I'll write a report, say, oh, maybe I'll write one paragraph. Instead of saying I'll clean the whole house, say, oh, let me just watch some few things. Instead of saying I'll exercise an hour, you can say that, oh, let me walk for just 5 minutes. And the more you engage in those actions, the easier it becomes to build on it or to feel more encouraged and motivated to do it. Okay. And the third strategy is to make the task even safer. So you can employ someone to help you with a task, you can practice with a friend, or you can break it down into smaller sections so that you can get the work done. Smaller steps reduce emotional resistance. This is the catch for today. Every unfinished task carries emotional weight. Every small action removes a little bit of the weight. Have you seen the difference? You don't have to finish everything within a day, but you simply need to start and gradually keep going until you are done. So, before we end today's episode, here's one question I would love you to think about. What have you been postponing? Not because you can't do it, but because you're afraid of how it will make you feel. What is it? Maybe today isn't the day to finish it, but definitely you can start today. Thank you for joining me on Streams of Emotions. And if this episode encouraged you in some way, I want you to share with someone. And I believe that it will be of a blessing or it will be of great help to the person, especially those who are using procrastination as an emotional first aid. Until next time, remember we learn, we listen, and lessen the load of emotions. Have a wonderful time.